Okay, what is a ratio? A ratio compares the amounts of two quantities. Now, you've probably seen them written before. They're written sideways with a colon. So, for example, flour to butter might be in the ratio of 1 to 2. This means the weight of the butter is twice the weight of the flour. So if you had 20 grams of butter, you'd have to have 40 grams, or 20 grams of flour, the order matters, you'd have to have 40 grams of butter. And so it has to be in proportion. And also another rule for ratios: when simplified, the ratio has the smallest possible whole numbers, so you do have to simplify them. For example, there are 12 cats and 9 dogs. What is the ratio of cats to dogs? So we've got 12 to 9, and this is cats. The first one has to be cats, and the second one has to be dogs. Now we can simplify that, so if you can find a number that will go evenly into it, each one, and I can see that you could divide it by each one by 3. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. And so that's our ratio, 4 to 3. You can put your ratio into the calculator if you're not confident in simplifying it yourself by hand. You can put it in, but make sure the smallest number, do 9 fraction, if you've got ABC, do 9 ABC 12 and then swap it round. You'll get 3 to 4, but swap it round, make sure it's 4 to 3, but it will simplify it for you if you put the smallest number on top. And remember to switch it if the biggest number is first. Okay, write in the simplest ratio, 21 to 18. Now if you can recognize that each one is divisible by 3, go ahead and do it. 3 goes into 21 7 times, 3 goes into 16 6 times. So each one is divisible by 3, and so the simplest ratio is 7 to 6. If I put in the calculator, make sure you go 18 fraction 21 and then switch it round. Now 500 to 300, I can immediately divide each side by 100. If you do the same to both sides, it keeps it in proportion. So you're left with 5 to 3. Okay, now 45 to 75, I might put that in the calculator, or if you could recognize each one's divisible by 15, you get it down to 3 to 5. Okay, the next rule of ratios is that ratios have no units. So they're always just numbers. And they also must be in the same unit before you simplify them. So if I have 80 centimeters to 1 meter, I am going to have the ratio of 80 to 100. I have to change that to centimeters first. Now I can divide each one by 10, so I get down to 8 to 10, and I can divide that by 2, and so I get it down to 4 to 5. Okay, you try the next ones. 500 meters to 1 kilometer. Now we'll change the kilometer to meters so we don't have any decimals. So 500 to 1000, and so that's the ratio we have to simplify. Divide each side by 100, and we're left with 5 to 10, which can be reduced to 1 to 2. Each side's divisible by 5. 475 mils, changing the litres to mils, we've got 1000, and you might put that in your calculator to do it, or keep dividing until you get down to 19 to 40 is your answer. 3 kilograms to 500 grams, we've got 3000 grams to 500 grams. We can divide each side by 100 by crossing 2 zeros off both sides. So we've got 30 to 5, which gives us a ratio of 6 to 1. 5 will go into itself and 5 will go into 30 6 times. Right, some more rules of ratios. Ratios can be written as fractions. So how do we do that? If we have 1 part butter to 3 parts flour, here's your ratio. Now if you want to write that as a fraction, you add the parts up all together. So there are 1 plus 3 parts, so there's 4 parts altogether. Add those two numbers together, and then use the first one as the numerator over the total parts altogether as the denominator. So we've got 1 over 4 and 3 over 4. Right, write each side as a fraction. So altogether, how many parts have we got? 8 and 5 is 13. So we've got 5/13 and 8/13. 3 plus 5 is 8. So we've got 3/8 and 5/8. 1 plus 2 is 3. So we've got 1/3 and 2/3. Okay, ratios have got more rules. So let's have a look at the next ones. Ratios can have more than two numbers. I think 3, 4. Now, when they've got more than two numbers, you can't use your calculator. So you have to know how to divide to get them down to the smallest ratio. So if you get it like this, you recognize that each one is divisible by 4. So go ahead and divide, and you get it down to 4 to 5 to 8. Okay, try these. You look at that, ends in a 0 or a 5, so I know that each one's going to be divisible by 5. So 4 to 3 to 6. A recipe has 50 grams butter, 300 grams flour and 50 grams sugar. So our ratio is 50 to 300 to 50. Express it as a ratio. Divide each one by 10. Now 5 will go into 30, so we reduces it to 1 to 6 to 1. Okay. Yeah, let's see if we've got some more rules. Yeah, you cannot have fraction or decimals in a ratio. So we have to, if there's a fraction or a decimal in it, you have to multiply by something to make them disappear. So if we have 3.5 to 5.5, change it to an improper fraction first. So 3.5 is 7 over 2. 3 2s are 6 and 1 is 7. 5 2s are 10 and 1 is 11. So we've got 7 over 2 to 11 over 2. Now if we multiply each side by 2, the fraction cancels and we end up with 7 to 11. If you had thirds, you'd multiply each one by 3, and that would remove the fraction. Okay, here's a decimal one. Now, we can't have decimals in a ratio like this, so you look for the largest number of decimal places. Now that's 2, so if I multiply that by 100, I will get rid of that decimal point. But I have to multiply that one by 100 as well to keep it in the same proportion. So 0.1 times 100 is 10, and 0.01 times 100 is 1, and so we've got our ratio is 10 to 1. Okay, so try these ones. 4/5 to 3/5. Now to get rid of the fraction, look at the denominator and if they're both the same, multiply by that number, or multiply by a number they'll both go into, lowest common denominator. That cancels and you're left with 4 to 3. Okay, 6 is like 6 over 1. And so if I multiply both sides by 4, you'll get rid of that 4 on the bottom. 6 4s are 24. 3 4s are, oh no, that cancels, so you're left with 3. And simplify, 3 goes into 24 8 times, so it's 8 to 1. And one more decimal, I've got to multiply each one by 100 to get rid of the decimal. And so you're left with 150 to 305. And if you put that in your calculator, or recognize they're divisible by 5, you get 30 to 61. Okay, now some practice on page 15 and 16 in the booklet, and some harder ones in your textbook. Well done.